Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
All right, here we go. Back again for some more killing of the serial variety. Getting it with our first ever female serial killer, who is the first ever woman to be classified as a serial killer by the FBI.
right.
Which includes killing more than 3 people, their definition, targeting victims whom she did not know and did not know each other, and allowed some time to elapse between each killing.
Right.
Obviously, there's been multiple women who've killed. Right. Usually they're patients. That's all I could find is just patients. Yeah, we got Aileen Wuornos. Between 89 and 90, she was a hooker, prostituting along the highways in Florida, shot and killed and robbed 7 of her male clients, who basically are all the same profile, old guys. Well, afterwards, she obviously claimed that her clients had either raped or attempted to rape her, and it was all in self-defense.
Get the fuck out of here.
Obviously, we know better than that. She's going to have the usual serial... She should be a dude because she has the usual dude serial killer background, basically.
All right.
She was born Aileen Carol Pittman on February 29, 1956 in Rochester, Michigan.
Ooh.
Her mother, Diane, was 14 when she married Aileen's father, 18-year-old Leo Pittman.
Wow.
June 3rd, 1954, that happened. 14th in 1955, Diane gave birth to Aileen's brother, Keith. And then after less than 2 years of marriage, 2 months before Aileen was born, Diane filed for divorce. She then gave birth to Aileen at the age of 16. Broken home.
You ain't kidding. Aileen never met her daddy. 1967, Leo Pittman sentenced to life for kidnapping and raping a 7-year-old girl.
Yeah, that'll do it. Life, huh?
Wow. He was later on diagnosed with schizophrenia. He committed suicide by hanging in prison on the 30th of January.
There was a couple of accounts I saw on here. He got strangled. Actually, there was only one account. That's supposedly he might have got strangled.
Oh, you know he did. I don't care. There was still a 7-year-old girl in 67. Ooh, surprised he made it that long. Now, okay, so schizophrenia, that probably runs in the family. So I'm sure she got something with that. Wow, in January 1960, when Wuornos was almost 4 years old, Diane abandoned her children, leaving them with the maternal grandparents, Lori and Britta Wuornos. So her mommy's parents, so both her grandparents are alcoholics, Lori and Britta. They legally adopted Keith and Aileen on the 18th of March, 1960. Lori and Britta were Finnish Americans. Oh, a bunch of Finlands, huh? They were born in Lee, Finland. And they later moved to Michigan.
Well, clearly. That's how they got here.
Wow, they raised Aileen and Keith.
Wuornoses.
Right. They raised Aileen and Keith with their own children in Troy, Michigan.
Well, good for them.
They did not reveal what they were. In fact, the children's grandparents.
I mean, yeah, they were under 3 years old, both of them, so they wouldn't have remembered anyways.
Right. Aileen discovered the truth at around age 12. Information which did not help an already troublesome situation, right?
Well, even before then, by the age of 11, she began engaging in sexual activities in school in exchange for cigarettes, drugs, and food.
Wow.
She had also engaged in sexual activities with her brother, supposedly. Well, she said that her alcoholic grandfather had sexually assaulted and beat her when she was a child. Before beating her, he would force her to strip out of her clothes. When they discovered their true parentage, they rebelled against his severity, quickly becoming incorrigible.
Right.
And
you ain't my daddy.
worsening everything.
You ain't my daddy, bitch.
And that happened and got worse in 1970, age 14. She, just like her mama, she got pregnant after being supposedly raped by a family friend, she says.
Wow. Well, at that time, this was a very popular thing to do. She was sent to an unwed mother's home for the duration of her pregnancy. You got to leave until you come back without that baby. Nobody knows what happened. The staff found her hostile, uncooperative, and unable to get along with her peers. Aileen gave birth to a boy at a home for unwed mothers on the 23rd of March, 1971, and the child was placed for adoption.
Of course it was.
A few months after her son was born, she dropped out of school at about the same time that her grandmother died of liver failure. Yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah.
When Aileen was 15, her granddaddy threw her out of the house. She began to living in the woods near her home, near her old house, and supported herself through prostitution.
Yeah.
Damn.
Well, fast forward 3 years at the age of 18, On May 27th, she was arrested in Jefferson County, Colorado for driving under the influence, disorderly conduct, and firing this will come in play, 22 caliber pistol from a moving vehicle.
Wow.
She was later charged with failure to appear as well. 1976, she hitchhiked to Florida, where she met 69-year-old yacht club president Louis Grotz Fell. They married quickly, and the announcement of their nuptials was printed in the local newspaper Society pages. Well, Aileen continually involved herself in confrontations at their local bar and went to jail briefly for an assault.
Oh, shit.
Gotta get her under control, Louis.
She also hit her husband with his own cane, leading him to gain a restraining order against her within weeks of the marriage. She said, screw this shit. I'm going back to Michigan, where on the 14th of July, 1976, she was arrested at Bernie's Club in Mansalona, Antrim County, and charged with assault and disturbing the peace for throwing a cue ball at a bartender's head.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, that's like attempted murder.
It would be.
17th of July, her brother, Keith, dead, esophageal cancer. And Aileen, she received $10,000 from his life insurance.
Pretty decent money in, 76?
Right. Aileen and Fell, they annulled their marriage on the 21st of July after only 9 weeks.
Yeah, mistake there, buddy. 79, trying to get his rocks off. And
Holy shit.
Work out for you. Oh, in August 76, she was given a $105 fine for drunk driving. So, yeah, back then they only fined your asses too. She used the money inherited from her brother to pay the fine and spent the rest within 2 months buying luxuries, including a new car, which she wrecked shortly afterwards.
Oh, wow.
1978, age of 22, she attempted suicide by shooting herself in the stomach.
Oh.
And that came within the ages of 14 and 22 when she attempted suicide 6 times.
Damn.
May 20th, 81, she was arrested in Edgewater, Florida for the armed robbery of a convenience store where she stole a measly $35 and 2 packs of smokes.
I mean, that's just sad news there.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
And it's armed, as it said?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Wow. Well, after that, she was sentenced to prison on the 4th of May, 1982. She was released 1 year later, June 30th. Another year later, May 1st, 1984, Aileen was arrested for attempting to pass forged checks at a bank in Key West. And on the 30th of November, 1985, she was named as a suspect in the theft of a revolver and ammunition in Pasco County. And the
Once a year.
Right. Well, this is a couple months.
Well, still.
Right. January 4th, 1986. She was arrested again in Miami and charged with car theft, resisting arrest, obstruction of justice, providing identification bearing her aunt's name.
Well,
And Miami officers said, you know what? Guess what else we found, baby? A 38 caliber and a box of ammo in the stolen car. Which she can be like, well, it's not mine, but anything in that car is hers, right?
I stole it, but I didn't have the gun.
All right.
On June 2nd, 1986, Volusia County deputy sheriffs, they detained her for questioning after a male companion accused her of pulling a gun in his car and demanding $200.
Oh, wow.
She was then found to be carrying spare ammunition, and police discovered a .22 pistol under the passenger seat she had occupied.
Oh, wow.
1986, Aileen, 30 at this time, met a 24-year-old named Tyria Moore. Tyria? She was a motel maid at Dayton Beach gay bar called Zodiac.
Daytona.
Dayton, right? Dayton. They moved in together, and Aileen supported them with her earnings as a hooker.
On the 4th of July, 1987, everybody's got their fireworks ready to roll, their hot dogs and hamburgers on the grill, and popping their first can of beer. Daytona Beach police detained Aileen and Moore at a bar for questioning regarding an incident in which they were accused of assault and battery with a beer bottle. On the 12th of March, 1988, Aileen accused a Daytona Beach bus driver of assault. She claimed that he pushed her off the bus following a confrontation, which he probably did. And was like, get the fuck out of here.
Being dumb, probably. Well, Aileen murdered 7 men, like we know, within 12 months.
Damn.
All of them between the ages of 40 and 65. And the first one, November 30th, 1989, she came across a middle-aged man named Richard Mallory. He was the owner of a Clearwater, Florida electronics repair business. And he was known to close up shop abruptly and disappear for a few days at a time on drinking and sex binges.
Fantastic. You can do whatever he wants.
He kept employees at his business only long enough to clear the back end of work that accrued during one of his disappearances. Right. Then let him go once his repair orders were caught up again.
Yep.
His only constants were alcohol, sex, and paranoia. So when he didn't show up to open his shop in December, early December 89, no one even thought to think much of it.
Was that like an old punk band or something?
Thought to think much of it?
No. Alcohol, Sex, and Paranoia.
Could be.
Right.
Or at least the name of an album.
Right. There was no one even close enough to him to even notice that he was gone. It wasn't until his 1977 Cadillac was found a few days later outside Daytona that anyone knew anything was amiss. On the 13th of December 1989, Jimmy Bonci and his friend James Davis, they were looking for scrap metal along a dirt road close to Interstate 95 in Volusia County. Well, instead of saleable junk, they found a body wrapped in a carpet. Fingerprints carefully taken from the badly decomposed hands proved that this was, in fact, Richard Mallory. He had been killed with 3 shots from a .22 caliber handgun.
Oh.
With 2 of those shots to his left lung, they were found to have been the cause of death.
That'll do it.
Several months of investigation into his sordid lifestyle and somewhat shady acquaintances produced no real leads. Initial suspicion revolved around a stripper who went by the name of Chastity. But all evidence, what little that there was, didn't add up. So guess what happened to Mallory's case? Cold.
For now. Well, at her trial later, she would claim, well, this is her first victim, obviously, and she would claim that Mallory beat, raped, and sodomized her after he drove her to an abandoned area for sexual services. Mallory, later in the trial, it became known that Mallory had previously been convicted of attempted rape in Maryland.
Oh.
Aileen made no mention of this until she stood trial, and Moore never claimed she mentioned to her there. How would she know that, though?
Right. On June 1st, an unidentified naked male body was found. This is June 1st, 1989. Unidentified naked male body found in the woods of Citrus County, Florida, about 40 miles north of Tampa. The Popo initially suspected Matthew Cocking, which was a surveyor who found the body, as he was known to carry a gun, and he spewed profanity and threats at anyone who questioned him about his find. The identification of the body on June 7th as that of David Spears of Bradenton, Florida, they cleared Cocking. Like, it wasn't him, even though he's a piece of shit.
Right. Well, hothead some bitch.
Right. Spears, whose previous job was a heavy equipment operator who was last seen on May 19th. His truck found shortly after that on Interstate 75 with the doors unlocked and the license plate missing. He had been shot 6 times with a .22 caliber pistol. Uh-oh, I think we're getting a trend here.
Well, meanwhile, 30 miles south in Pasco County, yet another naked body was found a few miles off of I-75. This one was discovered June 6th, had been wrapped in an electric blanket, and was so badly decomposed that medical examiners were not able to obtain fingerprints and could not estimate time of death, which they later said it was about May 19th.
Sure they did.
Now, the 9 bullets found in the remains were damaged by the decomposition, but they were later confirmed to have come from a .22 caliber weapon. Pasco County Detective Tom Muck had no immediate luck identifying as John Doe, which is later identified as Charles Carskadden, age 40. But he heard about this case in Citrus County. He notified the sheriff there, the sheriff's investigator, Marvin Padgett, about the similarities and told him to stay in touch.
All right.
Searching further for leads, he called the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and he was told of their own mystery guest. Again, he noted similarities, but didn't feel he had enough to put together an investigation.
All right, there's so much shit going on.
Not yet. There's plenty of people die from .22s and doing the things they do.
On the 4th of July, 1990, a car careened off the State Road 315 near Orange Springs, Florida, and came to a rest in some brush. Rhonda Bailey, who was sitting on her porch at the time, watched the accident happen. She said that 2 women clambered frantically from the car, throwing beer cans into the woods and swearing at each other. You can bitch!
Dumbass, I told you to watch the road.
The brown-haired woman said very little. The blonde, whose arm was bleeding from an injury sustained in the crash, did most of the talking. She begged Bailey not to call the police, saying her father lived just up the road. She and her companion got back in the car, which now had a smashed windshield and other damage, and they got it out of the brush and drove out on the road, huh?
Well, they didn't make it too far. They abandoned it just down the road and began walking. Hubert Hewitt of the Orange Springs Volunteer Fire Department responded to a call about the accident and asked the 2 women if they had been the ones in the car.
Nope.
The blonde cursed at him and said no, they had not, and they did not want any help. He left them alone and they walked on. This would never happen today.
You ain't kidding. They're like, hold on, bitch.
Marion County Sheriff's deputies found the car where the women had left it. It was a 1988 Pontiac Sunbird, gray with 4 doors. The glass in the front doors as well as the windshield smashed. There were apparent blood stains throughout the interior, and guess what? The license plate was missing.
A computer search based on the VIN number revealed that the car belonged to a Peter Symes, who had disappeared on the 7th of June after leaving his home in Jupiter, Florida. He was going to visit some relatives in Arkansas.
You didn't make it too far.
Well, Peter, he was a 65-year-old retired merchant seaman who devoted much of his time to a Christian outreach ministry.
Oh.
John Wisniewski of the Jupiter Popo, who had been working the case since Symes was reported missing, sent out a nationwide teletype containing descriptions of 2 women.
Uh-oh.
He also sent a synopsis of the case and sketches of the women to the Florida Criminal Activity Bulletin. Then he waited patiently. He was not optimistic about finding Symes alive. His body never found.
Never to this day. Well, meanwhile, Troy Burris, he left on his delivery route from Gilchrist Sausage. He's delivering that sausage.
Yeah.
Early on the morning of July 30th. When he didn't return that afternoon, Gilchrist's manager, Johnny May Thompson, he started calling around and discovered Burris hadn't shown up for his last few stops.
Oh, shit.
Later that night, she and it's a girl. Her girl's name is Johnny.
Wow.
She and her husband, they went out looking for him. About 2 a.m., Burris's wife reported him missing. 2 hours later, Marion County Sheriff's deputies, they found his truck on the shoulder of State Road 19, which is 20 miles east of Ocala. It was unlocked, keys missing, so was Burris.
Uh-oh. Well, he was found 5 days later. A family out for a picnic in Ocala National Forest. It just happened upon his body in a clearing just off Highway 19. This was about 8 miles where his truck was found. The Florida heat and humidity had hastened decomposition, precluding identification at the scene. But his wife identified his wedding ring.
Damn.
He had been killed with 2 shots from a .22 caliber gun, one to the chest and one to the back.
Means he was walking ahead of him and they shot him in the back.
Yeah, and then he fell and they shot him in his chest. Or they shot him in his chest and
Rolled him over.
And he fell forward and then they shot him in his back.
Yeah, most likely. You don't fall forward when you get shot in your chest, do you?
Maybe. Who knows? Investigator John Tilley's initial suspect was a drifter named Curtis Michael Blankenship. He had been hitchhiking on Highway 19 the day of Burris's disappearance, and he was also picked up close to the abandoned truck.
Oh.
It became evident as the investigation progressed that Blankenship, he wasn't even close to being involved. For the time being, Tilley had no suspects.
He goes, oh, that rules out the bum.
There's that.
Who else? Our next victim was Dick Humphreys, 56 years old, who was a retired United States Air Force major, former state child abuse investigator, and former chief of police.
Oh, shit.
He went missing on his way home from work September 11th, 1990. The very next day, his body was found in Marion County, fully clothed, been shot 7 times in the head and torso. 6 .22 caliber slugs were recovered from his body. The 7th went through his wrist and never found. His car, that was found late September in Suwannee County.
About a month later, the nude body of Walter Gino Antonio was found on a logging road in Dixie County. 60-year-old Antonio was a trucker, sometimes security guard, and he was a member of the Reserve Popo.
Oh.
He had been shot 4 times with the .22 caliber handgun. Here it goes. When he was found on the 19th of November, he had been dead less than 24 hours. His car was found 5 days later across the state in Brevard County. Captain Steve Binniger was commander of the Marion County Sheriff's Criminal Investigation Division, and he knew about the crimes in Citrus and Pasco counties. He could not ignore the similarities, and he was formulating a theory, along with a multi-agency task force with representatives from counties where victims were found. He's like, we're going to get this statewide, baby.
We got a serial killer on our hands, boys. No one stepped up. No one stopped to pick up hitchhikers anymore.
You couldn't.
That was his reasoning anyways. So the perpetrators of these crimes had to be initially non-threatening to the victims.
Right.
He suspected women specifically. He suspected the 2 women who had wrecked Peter Symes' car and walked away even more specifically.
Right.
Well, he then turned to the press for help. Late November, Routers, they ran a story about the killings, saying police were looking for the women. Papers across Florida picked up the story and ran with it, along with the police sketches of the women in question.
Uh-oh, here we go.
It's getting hot.
Ooh, it didn't take very long, though, for the leads to start pouring in. By mid-December, police had several tips involving the same 2 women. A man in Homosassa Springs said the 2 women had rented a trailer from him about a year earlier. Their names were Tyra Moore and Lee. A woman in Tampa said the women had worked at a motel south of Ocala. Their names, she said, were Tyra Moore and Susan Blahavec. An anonymous caller identified the women as Ty Moore and Lee Blahavec. who bought an RV in Homosassa Springs. Lee Blahavec was the dominant one, the caller said, and a truck stop prostitute. Both were lesbians.
You know that? I guess, maybe.
All right.
The mother lode, though, came from Port Orange near Daytona. Police there had been tracking the movements of both the women and provided a detailed account of the couple's movements from late September to mid-December. They had stayed primarily at the Fairview Motel in Harbor Oaks, where Aileen registered as Cammie Marsh Green. Back then, too, you could just say whatever name.
Right, they didn't care. They spent some time living in a small apartment behind a restaurant very near to Fairview, but they returned to the motel. In early December, they left Fairview. Aileen returned alone and stayed until the 10th of December. A quick computer check gave driver's license and criminal record information on Tyra Moore, Susan Blahavec, and Cammie Marsh Green. Moore had no real record, breaking and entering charges against her. That's it. In 1983, which had been dropped. So they're like, well, this bitch seems to be just.
All right. Well, Blahavec had one trespassing arrest, while Green had no record at all. Additionally, the photograph on Blahavec's license did not match the one for Green.
Uh-oh.
The Green ID was one that paid off best. Volusia County officers checked area pawn shops and found that in Daytona, Cammie Marsh Green had pawned a camera and a radar detector and had left the requisite thumbprint on the receipt. These items had belonged to Richard Mallory. Ormond Beach, he pawned a set of tools that matched the description of those taken from David Spears' truck as well.
That very thumbprint that they found was the key. Jenny Ahern of the automated fingerprint identification system found nothing on her initial computer search. But when she came to Volusia County and began a hand search of fingerprint records there, within an hour, she said, guess what, guys? Jackpot. The print showed up on a weapons charge, an outstanding warrant against a Lori Grody. Ooh, Grody.
Also, a bloody palm print found in Peter Symes' Sunbird matched Lori Grody's prints. All this information was sent to the National Crime Information Center. Responses came from Michigan, Colorado, and Florida. Lori Grody, Susan Blahavec, and Cammie Marsh Green. You guessed it, all aliases for Aileen Carol Wuornos.
The hunt for Aileen began in earnest on the 5th of January, 1991. Pairs of officers, including 2 undercover as bucket and drums, drug dealers down from Georgia, they hit the street hoping to track her down. On the evening of the 8th of January, Mike Joyner and Dick Martin, in their rows as bucket and drums, spotted her at the Port Orange pub. They meant for their takedown to develop gradually, as they wanted an airtight case. But Port Orange police entered suddenly and took Aileen outside. They're like, bitch, you about to be called.
Mike Joyner frantically phoned the command post at Pirates Cove Motel, where authorities from 6 jurisdictions had come to work the case. This development wasn't because of a leak, they surmised. They were just cops doing their jobs. Right, they had seen the sketch of these bitches how many times? These guys ain't involved in the investigation. They know nothing. Bob Kelly of the Volusia County Sheriff's Office called the Port Orange Police Station, told them not to arrest Wuornos under any circumstances. The word that was relayed to the cops in the nick of time, and Wuornos returned to the bar. Joyner and Martin, they struck up a conversation with her and bought her a few beers.
Well, they could have arrested her and just went down to the jail and picked her up.
Right. Well, then she left the bar at around 10 o'clock, declining an offer for... they were probably trying to get her in the act.
Yeah.
She declined an offer for a ride. Once again, the cautious takedown was almost ruined.
Well, this is because 2 Florida Department of Law Enforcement officers pulled up behind Aileen as she was walking down Ridgewood Avenue, following her with their lights off. Officers at the command post made a call and got the FDLE officers off the street, and Aileen made it to her next destination. It was a biker bar called The Last Resort. Joyner and Martin met her there for a while, drank more beers, shot more bowl. They left just after midnight, and Aileen didn't leave at all. She spent her last night of freedom sleeping on an old car seat in The Last Resort.
That was her last resort.
Hey, good for her.
Well, the following afternoon, Joyner and Martin were back at The Last Resort as bucket and drums, talking Wuornos up and wearing transmitters that kept the police apprised of everything that went on. They had planned on making their arrests later that night, but The Last Resort was gearing up for a barbecue, and bikers would start pouring in any second. You know they ain't going to take no cops. The decision was made at the command post to go ahead with the rest right now.
Do it.
Joyner, Martin, they asked Wuornos if she'd like to get cleaned up at their motel room. She accepted their offer and bye-bye to the bar, or to the motel, supposedly.
Wow. Outside on the steps, Laura Horzepa of the Marion County Police Department approached her and told her that she was being arrested on an outstanding warrant for Lori Grody. No mention was made of the Moitas, and no announcement was made to the media that the suspect had been arrested. The caution was wise. As of yet, they had no murder weapon and no Tyra Moore. Yes, they really can't really do anything, right?
Well, police located Moore the next day in Pittston, Pennsylvania.
Ooh.
Jerry Thompson of Citrus County and Bruce Munster of Marion County, they flew to Scranton to interview her. She was read her rights, but not charged with anything. Munster made sure she knew what perjury was, swore her in, and sat back as she gave her statement. She had known about the murder since Lee had come home with Richard Mallory's Cadillac, she said, I would assume.
Right.
Lee had openly confessed that she had killed a man that day, but Moore told her not to say anything else. I told her I didn't want to hear about it. And then, anytime she would come home after that and say certain things, telling me about where she got something, I'd say, I don't want to hear it.
She had her suspicions.
She didn't mind going in the car with her that they crashed, though.
Right. She had her suspicions, though. But wanted to know as little as possible. The more she knew, she reasoned, the more compelled she would feel to report Lee to authorities. And she didn't even want to do that. I was just scared, she said. She's always said she'd never hurt me. But then you can't believe her. So I don't know what she would have done. The very next day, Moore accompanied Munster and Thompson back to Florida to assist the investigation. A confession would make the case against Aileen virtually airtight. And Munster and Thompson explained their plan for obtaining one to Moore on the flight. They would put her in a Daytona motel and have her make contact with Lee in jail, saying she received money from her mother and came down to get the rest of her things.
Obviously, their phone conversations would be taped, and Moore was to tell Aileen that authorities had been questioning her family, that she thought the Florida murders would be mistakenly pinned on her, which Moore. And Munster and Thompson hoped that, out of loyalty to Moore, Aileen would confess.
Oh.
First call from Aileen came on January 14th. She was still under the impression that she was only in jail for the Lori Grody weapons violation. Oh. When Moore breached her suspicions, Wuornos reassured her, I'm only here for that concealed weapons charge in 86 and a traffic ticket. And I tell you what, man, I read the newspaper and I wasn't one of those little suspects.
Hey.
Sure, bud.
She was aware, though, that jailhouse phone was monitored and made efforts to speak of the crimes in code words and to construct alibis. I think somebody at work where you worked at said something that it looked like us, she said. And it isn't us, see? It's a case of mistaken identity.
Sure it is.
For 3 days, the calls continued. Moore became more insistent that the popos were after her, and it became clear that Aileen knew what was expected of her. She even voiced suspicion that Moore was not alone, that someone was there taping their conversation. Damn.
Well, but as usual, as time passed, she became less careful about what she said. She would not let Moore go down with her. Apparently. She said, just go ahead and let them know what you need to know, what they want to know, or anything, she said. And I will cover for you because you're innocent. I'm not going to let you go to jail.
Right.
Listen, if I have to confess, I will. And on the morning of January 16th, that's exactly what she did.
No shit, look at that.
She came back to the two main points over and over during her confession to Larry Horzepa and Bruce Munster. First, she made it clear that Moore was not involved in any way of any of the murders. And additionally, she was emphatic in her assertion that nothing was her fault, not the murders, and not any circumstance that led her down the criminal path that was her life.
Well, she claimed that all the killings were done in self-defense. Each victim had either assaulted her, threatened her, or raped her. Her story seemed to develop as she told it. When she thought she said something incriminating, she would back up and retell that part, changing details to suit her overall scenario. She'd been raped several times in the past few years, she claimed, and had enough. When each of her victims became aggressive, she said, you know what? I killed out of fear.
I feared for my life. Several times, Michael O'Neill, a public defender from the Volusia County Public Defender's Office, he advised Wuornos to stop talking, finally asking in exasperation, do you realize these guys are cops? Aileen answered, I know, and they wanted to hang me, and that's cool, because maybe, man, I deserve it. I just want to get this over with.
Right.
An avalanche of book and movie offers poured in to detectives, relatives,
gosh.
Moore, and even Aileen herself.
Of course.
Aileen seemed to think she would make millions from her story, not yet realizing that Florida had a law against criminals profiting in such a manner.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. She was all over the local and national media. She felt famous, and she continued to talk about the crimes with anyone who would listen, including jail employees.
Oh, wow.
With each retelling, she refined her story, casting herself in a better light each time. She's like, yeah, maybe this time I'll tell it.
Right.
He started choking me or something.
Into this tumult came Aileen Prawl, a 44-year-old born-again Christian who ran a horse breeding and boarding facility near Ocala, Florida. She had seen Aileen's picture in a newspaper and wrote her a letter. She said, "My name is Aileen Prawl. I'm a born again. You're going to think I'm crazy, but Jesus told me to write you." She provided her home telephone number, and on 30th of January, Aileen called her on a collect call for the very first time. Almost immediately, Prawl became her ardent defender and helpmate. Prawl advised her that her public defenders were trying to profit from her story, as was everyone else, and so was she.
Right.
Aileen was trying.
Well, then Aileen asked for and got new attorneys. And then Arlene, she spoke with reporters, describing her relationship with Aileen to a Vanity Fair reporter as a soul binding. We're like Jonathan and David in the Bible.
Yeah.
It's as though part of me is trapped in jail with her. We always know what the other is feeling and thinking. To another reporter, she said, if the world could know the real Aileen Wuornos, there's not a jury that would convict her.
Yeah.
Throughout 91, Arlene, she appeared on talk shows, tabloids, talked to anybody who would listen about what she perceived as Aileen's true good nature. What the hell's up with this chick?
You ain't getting. She also arranged interviews for Aileen with reporters she thought would be sympathetic. And in this forum, Aileen continued to tell and embellish her fantastic story. Both Aileen and Arlene emphasized Aileen's troubled upbringing, and both leveled accusations of corruption and complicity at anyone who was handy. The agents proffering the book and movie deals to detectives, the attorneys, and especially Tyra Moore. And just when it seemed things couldn't get any weirder, guess what happened? They did. Because on the 22nd of November 1991, Aileen Prawl and her husband legally adopted Aileen. Prawl said God had told her that she needed a daughter.
I didn't know you can adopt 30-something-year-olds, but...
Guess so.
Well, Aileen's attorneys engineered a plea bargain, to which Aileen agreed, in which she would plead to 6 charges and receive 6 consecutive life terms.
Ooh.
One state attorney, however, thought she should receive the death penalty. So, January 14th, 1992, Wuornos went to trial for the murder of Richard Mallory. The evidence said witnesses against her were severely damaging. Dr. Arthur Botting, the medical examiner who had autopsied Mallory's body, he stated Mallory had been between 10 and 20 agonized. It had taken 10 to 20 minutes to die. Tyra Moore testified that Wuornos had not seemed overly upset, nervous, or drunk when she told her of her killing Mallory. 12 other men told of encounters with her along Florida's highways over the years as well.
Ooh, yeah.
Psycho bitch.
Right. Florida has a law known as the Williams Rule that allows evidence relating to other crimes to be admitted if it helps to show a pattern.
Yeah, see, a lot of states don't allow that.
Nope. Because of the Williams Rule, information regarding the other killings was presented to the jury. Aileen's claim of having killed in self-defense would have been a lot more believable had the jury known only of Mallory.
Right.
Now, with the jury made aware of all the other murders, self-defense seemed improbable. After the excerpts from her videotape confession were played, the self-defense claim seemed ridiculous.
She clearly don't care.
Right. On the tape, Aileen appeared confident and not at all upset by the story she was telling. All right, you think, oh, they raped me, I didn't mean to do it. 1 became 2, 2 became 3.
They're all pricks. I was just doing it to feed my family.
All right. She made easy conversation with their interrogators, repeatedly told her public defender to shut the fuck up. Her image spoke from the screen. I took a life. I'm willing to give up my life because I killed people. I deserve to die. Well, there you go.
Tricia Jenkins, one of Wuornos' public defenders, she did not want her client to testify and told her not to.
Right.
But Aileen insisted on telling her story. By now, her account of Mallory's killing barely resembled the one she even gave in her confession.
Oh, shit.
Mallory had raped and sodomized her, she claimed, and had tortured her. On cross-examination, prosecutor John Tanner obliterated any shred of credibility she had. As he brought to light all her lies and inconsistencies, she became agitated and angry.
Yep.
That's one thing you don't want to do. What if she was telling the truth, though? Because that guy was like a fucking weirdo.
Right.
But then she liked the way it felt and then decided to go do it a lot of times.
Her attorneys repeatedly advised her not to answer questions. and she invoked her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination 25 times.
Damn. That's not helping you.
She was the defense's only witness. And when she left the stand, there was not much doubt about how her trial would end. Because it happened on the 27th of January, Judge Uriel Blunt charged the jury. They returned with the verdict less than 2 hours later. There, they found Aileen Wuornos guilty of first-degree murder And as they filed out of the courtroom, she exploded with rage, shouting, "I'm innocent. I was raped. I hope you get raped, scumbags of America."
Oh, no. Her outburst was still fresh in the minds of jurors as the penalty phase of her trial began the next day.
Oh, fuck.
Expert witnesses for the defense testified that Aileen was mentally ill. She suffered from borderline personality disorder, and that her tumultuous upbringing had stunted and ruined her. Jenkins referred to her client as a damaged, primitive child, and she pleaded the jury to spare Wuornos' life.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But jurors neither forgot nor forgave the women they'd come to know during the trial. With a unanimous verdict, they recommended that Judge Blunt sentence her to the electric chair. And he did just that January 31st. So you're gonna die.
Well, Aileen's defense made efforts during the trial to introduce evidence that Mallory was previously convicted for attempted rape in Maryland. And he served a sentence in a maximum security correctional facility providing remediation to sexual offenders. Records obtained from the correctional institution show that from 1958 to 1962, Mallory was indeed committed for treatment and observation, resulting from a criminal charge of assault with intent to rape. These records also reflect 8 years of overall treatment from the facility. In the year of 1961, it was observed of Mr. Mallory that he possessed strong sociopathic trends. Oh, okay, here, wait a minute. However, the judge refused to allow the records to be admitted in court as evidence and denied Aileen request for a retrial. Why can't it be? How come all the other murders?
All the other shit can, but not that about him? Wow. It's crazy.
That's insane.
March 31st, 1992, Aileen pleaded no contest to the murders of Charles Richard Humphreys, Troy Eugene Burris, and David Andrew Spears.
Yeah, there ain't no sense of fighting it.
Well, saying she wanted to get right with God.
Okay.
In her statement to the court, she said in part, "I wanted to confess to you that Richard Mallory did violently rape me, as I've told you, but these others did not.
Oh.
They only began to start to."
Okay.
She ended her monologue by turning to Assistant State Attorney Rick Ridgway and hissing, "I hope your wife,
Rick.
I hope your wife and children get raped in the ass."
Oh, shit.
Wow.
Damn you.
May 15th.
Not making anything better for you there, Aileen.
Right. May 15th, Judge Thomas Sawaya.
Oh.
Sawaya.
Yeah.
Handed her 3 more death sentences.
Sawaya?
Sure. She made an obscene gesture and muttered, "Motherfucker."
In June of 1992, Aileen pled guilty to the murder of Charles Edmund Karskaden. In November 1992, she received her 5th death sentence. Damn. In February 1993, Aileen pled guilty to the murder of Walter Gino Antonio and was sentenced to death again. No charges were brought against her for the murder of Peter Abraham Symes, as his body was never found. You can't do anything without a body. In all, Aileen Wuornos, 6 death sentences. She told several inconsistent stories about the killings, as we said before. She claimed that initially that all 7 men had raped or attempted to rape her while she was working as a whore, but later recanted a claim of self-defense, citing robbery, and desire to leave no witnesses as a reason for murder. As an interview with documentarian Nick Broomfield, when Aileen thought the cameras were off, she told him that it was, in fact, self-defense. But she could not stand being on death row, where she had been for 10 years at that point, and she just wanted to die.
She just wanted to get out of there. Well, Aileen, she was incarcerated at the Florida Department of Corrections Broward Correctional Institution, death row for women, and then transferred to the Florida State Prison for execution.
Damn.
Her appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court was denied in 1996.
Denied.
And in a 2001 petition to the Florida Supreme Court, she stated her intention to dismiss her legal counsel and terminate all pending appeals. "I killed those men, robbed them as cold as ice, and I'd do it again, too. There's no chance in keeping me alive or anything because I'd kill again."
All right, even in prison.
Right. I have hate crawling through my system.
Did she kill anybody else in prison? No. Or was she, like, in isolation?
I don't know about isolation. She didn't kill nobody, though. She says, "I'm sick of hearing this she's crazy stuff. I've been evaluated so many times. I'm competent, sane, and I'm trying to tell the truth. I'm one who seriously hates human life and would kill again."
While her attorneys argued that she was not mentally competent to make such a request, Aileen insisted that she knew what she was doing. And a court-appointed panel of psychiatrists, they agreed.
That's crazy. These lawyers, unless they're still working for her for free,
I doubt it.
they just wanted to keep getting money. She can't say that.
That Arlene Palis or whatever is probably paying for her.
Right. You would think.
Right. 2002, Aileen began accusing prison matrons of tainting her food with dirt, saliva, piss.
Yeah.
She said she had overheard conversations among prison personnel, trying to get me so pushed over the brink by them I'd wind up committing suicide before the execution, and wishing to rape me before execution. Oh.
She also complained of strip searches, tight handcuffing, door kicking, frequent window checks, low water pressure, mildew on her mattress, and catcalling in distaste and a pure hatred towards me.
Oh.
Aileen threatened to boycott showers and food trays when certain officers were on duty. In the meantime, my stomach's growling away and I'm taking showers through the sink of my cell.
All right, whatever.
Her attorney stated that Miss Wuornos really just wants to have proper treatment, humane treatment until the day she's executed.
Yeah, I don't think you get that.
He also added she believes what she's written.
That's fine.
Just because you believe it doesn't make any difference.
Like we've said a million times, it should be in a cell no bigger than 4 by 6.
It is.
I'm talking about 4 by 4 by 6. In the weeks before her execution, Aileen gave a series of interviews to documentarian Nick Broomfield and talked about being taken away to meet God and Jesus and the angels and whatever's beyond the beyond. Her final interview, she once again charged that her mind was tortured at PCI and her head crushed by sonic pressure. Food poisonings, other abuses worsened. Each time she complained to make her appear insane or to drive her insane, she said.
Oh.
She also turned on her interviewer. You sabotaged my ass. Society and the cops and the system. A raped woman got executed and was used for books and movies and shit. Her final on-camera words were, thanks a lot, society, for railroading my ass.
You gotta remember that monster movie with Charlene Theron came out while she was alive.
It's true. Dawn Botkins, a childhood friend of Aileen, later told Broomfield that her verbal abuse was directed at society and the media in general, not at him specifically.
Okay,
Obviously.
okay, Dawn.
Holy shit. I think you should get the electrocution chair, too.
Well, Aileen's execution by lethal injection took place October 9th, 2002.
I thought she got the electric chair.
Apparently not. She requested, I think by then they outlawed it because it took too long to die for that one guy. She requested a towel and a washcloth to wash her face and freshen up, said prison spokesman Sterling Ivey before the execution. She was very calm this morning, not as talkative as she has been in the past. Well, no shit. Wuornos, she was pronounced dead at 9:47 a.m. Eastern time, but the process of injecting lethal drugs into both of her arms started promptly at 9:30, according to WESH-TV news reporter Claire Metz, who witnessed the execution along with 31 others. A brown curtain was drawn back, and witnesses saw Wuornos turn to them, make a bizarre face, kind of smile, roll her eyes, and turn away. She was strapped in completely, unable to move with anything but her head. That's what Metz also reported.
Right.
At 9:31, she shut her eyes, and her head jerked backward. At 9:32, her mouth seemed to drop open, her eyes opened to slits, and it appeared she was gone. That's again according to Metz.
Right. Oh, she apparently declined her last meal, which could have been anything under $20.
What the hell? They must have did
That's
something because all these
bullshit.
other guys in the 60s were getting like everything.
Wow. What? She said, you know what? I'll take a cup of coffee instead. Her last words were, yes, I would just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus. June 6th, like the movie. Big mothership and all. I'll be back. I'll be back. She was the second woman in Florida and the 10th since 1976 to be executed. This is when the United States Supreme Court restored capital punishment.
Sure did. Other victim family members were not sorry that she's gone. She got off really easy. These men suffered.
Right.
These men's families suffered tremendously all these years.
Right.
I mean, it was cold-blooded murder. That's what Wanda Pouncey said. She was a victim's daughter. I wish it would have been a little harder on her. It was very, very easy. Very easy. Even the years in prison that she did.
Right.
It was a piece of cake. It was a cakewalk. That was said by Terry Griffith, who was also another victim's daughter. Volusia County State Attorney John Tanner prosecuted Wuornos and felt obligated to witness the execution himself. She liked to be in control. In fact, these killings, as much as anything, were acts of ultimate control. We've seen that in serial killer patterns in the past.
To have.
She killed these men to bring about the ultimate in control over their lives, which was to terminate it.
After her death, Aileen's body cremated. Her ashes scattered beneath a tree in her native Michigan by Aileen's childhood friend, Dawn Botkins. At Wuornos' request, Natalie Merchant's song Carnival from her album Tiger Lily in 1995
T.I. double grr.
was played at her funeral. Aileen spent many hours listening to this album on death row. When Merchant found out about this, she gave permission to use the song in the closing credits of Nick Broomfield's documentary, Aileen, Life and Death of a Serial Killer. That happened in 2003. Natalie, you allow that? She just wanted the money.
Right.
When director Nick Broomfield sent a working edit of the film, I was so disturbed by the subject matter that I couldn't even watch it.
But I decided to put my song in it.
Natalie Merchant went on to say, when director Nick Broomfield sent a working edit of the film, I was disturbed by the subject matter that I couldn't even watch it. Aileen led a torturing life that is beyond my worst nightmares. It wasn't until I was told that Aileen spent many hours listening to my album Tiger Lily while on death row, and we requested Carnival be played at her funeral, that I gave permission for using the song. It's very odd to think of the places my music can go once it leaves my hands. If it gave her some solace, I have to be grateful.
I guess, sure.
Right.
Jeez. Well, Broomfield later speculated on Wuornos' state of mind and motives. I think this anger developed inside her, and she was working as a prostitute, yes. I think she had a lot of awful encounters on the roads. And I think this anger just spilled out from inside her, and she finally exploded into incredible violence.
Maybe that Malloy guy did.
As I'm saying,
Set it off.
Maybe he tried something, and then she liked the way it felt killing somebody. Well, that was her way of surviving. I think Aileen really believed that she had killed in self-defense. I think someone who's deeply psychotic can't really tell the difference between something that is life-threatening and something that is a minor disagreement.
It's true.
That you could say something that she didn't agree with, right? How dare you?
Right.
She would get into a screaming black temper about it. And I think that's what had caused these things to happen. At the same time, when she wasn't in those extreme moods, there was an incredible humanity to her.
Right. Usually the case. According to some specialists, Aileen's crimes have been related to her psychopathic personality and her psychotraumatic past. Assessed by using the psychopathy checklist, Aileen scored 32 out of 40.
All right.
With a cutoff score of 30 for determining psychopathy.
She's a little bit of a psychopath.
Aileen was also known to meet the relevant criteria for determining borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. According to Bryce Arago, Aileen's childhood sexual abuse and career in sex work, it damaged her very bad. And it could have been seen that the traumatic experiences throughout most of her young life could play a part in her psychological state, obviously, including her biological mother's departure, as well as her grandmother ignoring the abuse she endured from her granddaddy, thus leading to the lack of development of a mother-daughter bond for Aileen as a young girl. Wasn't there.
Right.
And a young girl needs a daddy. She didn't have either that or a grandpa.
Right. Well, the damage was then made worse because both Wuornos and her brother believed that their grandparents were their actual parents.
Wow.
But at the age of 11, as we know, they learned this was not the case, which further damaged the relationship between Aileen and her adoptive grandparents. Aileen was also known to have early behavioral problems, such as having an explosive temper, which limited her ability to make friends, as well as making it increasingly difficult for her to maintain relationships.
Oh, what you do?
Her traumatic upbringing, including her physical and sexual abuse, have been partially linked to the development of her borderline personality disorder.
Wow. Such severe trauma can also disrupt the structuralization of the mind at various developmental points and result in primitive, dissociative, and splitting defenses to ward off the intensity of emotional and sexual stimulation that cannot be integrated as a child. Okay. FBI profiler Robert Ressler briefly mentions Aileen in his autobiographical history of his 20 years with the FBI, writing in 1992. He said he often does not discuss female serial killers because they tend to kill in sprees instead of in sequential fashion. Yeah, they usually will kill like 6 in one day, 2 days, a week. Would that be a spree killer?
Because they're psycho.
Right. He noted Aileen as the sole exception. Ressler, who allegedly coined the term serial killer to describe murderers seeking personal gratification, does not apply it to women killing in postpartum psychosis or to any murderer acting solely for financial gain, such as women who have killed a series of boarders or spouses. Yeah.
All right, good for her. She's a serial killer in the truest sense.
Yes.
Then. Aileen Wuornos.
She's a
a weirdo.
Aileen Weirdos.
Oh, all right. Our first woman serial killer of the series.
Well, Kyra, lucky that she made it through the whole escapade.
Right. Yeah, what happened there? Did she not get charged with nothing, apparently?
She's still alive.
Well, I don't know.
56, you think?
Well, that's Aileen Wuornos. We'll be back next week for Mafia. As we finally get to the actual acting, well, not the acting boss, the actual boss of the Lucchese family, Vic Amuso. So we'll be back with that and more Outlaws and Gunslingers. Check out the playlist on YouTube. Subscribe to YouTube. Share it with your friends and all that other good stuff. And we'll see you next week for some Mafia. We're the Month of Michiganders.
Bang, dang.